All right, I'm joined by, I think I'm going to say you're my favorite reporter.
Love that. Love that.
Just in general, not just sports business reporter, not just golf reporter. The reason I like your work so much is it's very different. In the media center, most guys are going to the press conference to write about, the 68 that Rory McIlroy shot. You're more concerned with who he talked to after. Is that a fair description of sort of what are you looking for at golf events?
I like to keep people on their toes, right? You go and try and it's no fun if you're not, right? So you go to an event and you try and mix it up. And you know what, Dan, I might go to an event. I went to the Players in March and ended up my best story that week I thought was on the USGA's media rights, right? Which has nothing to do with the Players Championship. Maybe it does because it's on NBC, but in a large way, it doesn't have anything to do with the Players Championship. So that's what my people look for, and that's what I try and go and execute on.
You're probably the best equipped person to comment on. I sort of, a lot of people ask me, where does all this money come from that all these players are making, and where did they find all this money after the live stuff? And I try to explain that so much of the golf business is CEOs who enjoy sort of hanging out with each other and having access. How would you explain to a layperson why a company like Truist, right, which is a bank, right? It's not like a consumer products or CDW. Why do these companies want to spend so much money in golf?
Well, one, because they love golf. If you look, like, let's use Truist for an example. Truist is a bank that's based in Charlotte. They're a newer bank, right? They just merged with BB&T and SunTrust merged a few years back. And so Truist is relatively new. And I think their CEO, Bill Rogers, said, I want to put our stamp down and make our name known across the country, not just as some Southeast regional bank. And these executives, they love having access to these players and being able to tell their friends and their colleagues, hey, I played golf with Jordan Spieth on Tuesday, or I played golf with Ricky Fowler on Tuesday. And so golf is just a great sport to entertain, to sell around. And it's why these companies are paying, some of these signature event sponsors, Dan, are paying, $25 million a year to sponsor a golf tournament.
Who are the three most important people in golf that the layperson doesn't know? So Jay doesn't count, Tiger doesn't count. I'll say Yasir doesn't count. When you see two people having a conversation, who sort of piques your interest?
When I see two people having a conversation,
like if you saw one guy talking to another guy, what would raise your alarm? Is like, oh, that's something.
Well, so great example of the PGA Championship last week, and this is the kind of stuff that I love and that our readers love. Is like I see Scott O'Neill, who's the CEO of Live, having a pretty lengthy discussion with Mark Steinberg, who has been the man behind Excel Sports Management for, 25 years at this point, right? Tiger's agent, obviously. Excel over the years has been pretty, I would say, anti-Live. They haven't been a huge supporter of Live. And so, like, to see the new CEO of Live and Mark Steinberg having I don't want to call it an animated conversation, but they were pretty deep on stuff, it looked to be, in front of the Quail Hollow Clubhouse. Like, I love seeing that. Anytime a network president is talking to someone, a David Burson from CBS, someone from NBC, anytime they're having a conversation with a governing body, a CEO of a PGA of America, or USGA rights are up, right? If I see David Burson having a conversation with Mike Wan or John Padani from who runs commercial for the USGA, I'm thinking, well, that's pretty interesting. The head of CBS, which doesn't have, USGA rights now, is talking to the head of the USGA. So does that mean that they're going to do a deal? Or
it's so funny because I think we think of these big organizations as like big organizations with like legal departments and this and the other, but like at the end of the day, at some point, it is like one person talking to another person and making a deal.
Yeah, it's just deal making. That's all it is, and it's built on relationships. I don't know. Maybe we'll get into it. Like the new LPGA commissioner, Craig Kessler, who was just announced, this past week, is a super endearing, a super personal guy who has a lot of deep relationships and who can do a lot of deals. And I think that's why he's going to be so important to the LPGA, because not a knock on Molly Marcoux-Simon, but one of the, some of the feedback I heard in her last couple of years from sponsors, from tournament organizers, was that the interpersonal relationship wasn't there. The connectivity wasn't there, which if you're in golf, that's what it's all about. And that's what you have to hit on.
All right, well, let's stop dancing around the elephant in the room. What is the state of the PGA Tour live negotiations? I mean, you're a proper insider. It seems to be, we are almost pretty damn close to 2 years since the framework agreement. I'll never forget it because it was 3 days before my wedding, and my second anniversary is coming up, so I'll never forget that. And Liv has been around. This is their fourth season. They've signed a lot of players. A lot of those players are still, contending in majors. John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau. Like, the status quo is what it is, right? Like, nothing's really changed, especially in the past year. I'm thinking back to, in December, into January of December 23, January 24, they signed Rahm and Hatton, and it felt like the PGA Tour was kind of on unstable footing, right? Sort of one person away from maybe an inflection point. Things have sort of calmed down since then. It feels like the PGA Tour is on the front foot. That might be simplistic. What's your sort of state of the negotiations?
Well, I mean, the negotiation between, and I'll correct you a little bit here, Dan, between the PGA Tour and the PIF, not
Sorry,
Liv, right?
I'm getting too general here. I'm
getting super in the weeds here, but yeah, I mean, I think we all know that they had these talks at the White House, and gosh, it's been 3 months ago now. That Trump and Tiger and Jay and Yasser were all at the White House. And yeah, there was a lot of optimism, obviously, that they would do a deal then. But now I think as the spring and we're getting into the summer has kind of progressed, there doesn't seem to be really any optimism in the industry. Like, that's from either side, from the Live side or from the Tour side, that there's really any momentum around talks, or that it's kind of like that CBA negotiation you see between a union and a league, and like the NHL or MLB. I've been around those for so long, working at a sports business publication. The sides, they have these meetings, and then they go their separate ways, and they don't talk, right? And there's been no discussion, to my knowledge, in the last few months. And I think you've seen, I thought Liv had a ton of momentum in the offseason. Look what they did. Like, going back to October, like we reported that Greg Norman was out, right? November, they bring Scott O'Neill on. They signed a deal with Fox Sports. To me, they had a lot of momentum. And the early part of their year, I know they're an international tour, but at least in the U.S., I felt like their momentum stalled a little bit just because they were so international. They played their first 4 events of the year overseas. They didn't get a ton of visibility in the U.S. We knew the ratings would not be good when they came out. But even with that, you still get those negative, thoughts and all this stuff that come out about the ratings. Even though they're overseas, they're playing in the middle of the night. And meanwhile, you have and I'll say, like, Liv has signed some corporate deals, right? They've brought Callaway has signed on with
Salesforce.
They had a 1-week Salesforce deal last week at the PGA. Ping obviously is on Neiman's team. So I'm not to say they haven't had any success, but the PGA Tour really has had a lot of success this spring. And as you mentioned, I think they are on their front foot. From the corporate deals they've signed to their television ratings have really bounced back from last year. They've been open about making changes. They have actually made some changes to their product, right? That's something that the tour has been known in the past for being kind of stagnant and just happy with what they've always been doing. And so they've made some changes to their product. We've seen it with the Tour Championship, which everyone kind of expects to change coming up this year. Wouldn't be shocked if we hear news on that in the next few weeks. The Tour Championship, you've seen their broadcasts. They've cut, Dan, between 6 and 8 minutes per tournament. I shouldn't say cut. They've added more live golf between 6 and 8 minutes per tournament. That doesn't seem like a lot, but to these commercial advertisers who pay a hefty sum to have visibility on these tournaments, it is a lot. And so you add that. I was told in 2023, they added 12 minutes of live golf across each tournament to their product. So, I mean, you think about 12 minutes and then you add 6 or 8 minutes this year. So you're going back the last 2 years and they've added about 20 minutes of live golf per tournament. Again, doesn't seem like a lot across 4 days, 3 hour windows, that sort of thing. But that's what the fans have been asking for. And the tour has delivered in a fair amount of ways.
The tour seems to be, I mean, obviously they're a more robust operation, right? Like the balance sheet makes more sense. There's going to be way less incentive for them to strike a deal just for a deal's sake, right? Because they're surviving in the current model. Do you get the sense that there's any anxiety on the live side? Because like, how much money are they losing, and can they really just continue to lose it and until Yasir says that's too much?
It's hard to say how much they've lost, per event or whatever. I mean, there's been some reports that have come out that, around like $5 billion, right? $5 billion is not a lot when you look at the treasure trove of, what is it? I feel like it goes up $100 billion every year. It's like
I think it's like $1 trillion now. I heard $1 trillion recently.
It might be $1 trillion. Yeah. I don't know. So, is $5 billion really that much to them? I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's a ton of anxiety. Liv has continued to, right? They just hired a new CEO. They keep bringing on executives. They just hired the guy who's running Aston Villa to kind of run a lot of their business, right? So they keep hiring, they keep pressing on, they keep scheduling new tournaments. The only way I think Liv would ever go away would be as if MBS just woke up one morning and said, you know what, I'm tired of this. We've done this. I think that's one interesting thing. Yasir has been such a key player in all this all along, and I do still think he is. But since Trump came into office this year, he's had the ear of MBS, and MBS has become a much bigger player in this situation, I think, than he was before. Not that he wasn't a big player before, but I think it's even more so elevated now. And so I think he's much more keenly aware as to what's going on with all of this. And so, you know what? Yeah, he could wake up one day and just say, I'm tired of doing this and we're going to move on. I don't necessarily think he will, but it could happen.
So much of why they did this, it seems like, or at least that was the hypothesis, was like the like non-tangible benefit, right? Soft power type of thing, right? Like of getting into the boardrooms. And so
sure.
Would there be an argument if we got these guys behind closed doors, would they say, yeah, we've lost $5 billion, but look at the conversations that we've had, look at the rooms we're in. Like, is part of it sort of, has it worked?
Oh yeah, it's totally worked. Look, I mean, I think it's absolutely, I would say it's worked. Like, has it worked from a business standpoint, from a like revenue standpoint, a return on investment? Probably not. But from a conversation standpoint, to a greater, everyone just talks about Liv as it's just another one of the golf tours now, right? It's absolutely worked, I think. And I will say, like, to the larger negotiations, right? There's been all this thought that, does the tour need to do a deal? Does PIF need to do a deal? I still have to think that the guys behind Strategic Sports Group, which put that $1.5 billion into the PGA Tour, I still have to think that they want to do a deal with the Saudis. One, because they want access to some of that capital that the Saudis have, and two, so that the Saudis don't come in. If you look at the guys behind Strategic Sports Group, they're owners of major stick and ball sports here in the U.S., and you have to think that those guys don't want the Saudis to come in and do to their own stick and ball sports what the Saudis have done to golf over the last few years. Now, granted, they've already done that to golf. I always think, like, what you've seen, the PIF has come in and sponsored like some events on the ATP on the tennis side after what they did with golf.
I think the world rankings are called the PIF World Rankings now.
They are. I've often thought, like, what if Yasir Al-Rumayyan was a big tennis player instead of a big golfer? And what if the PIF came in and just rocked tennis like this? And maybe now you would have the PIF Global Series or something like that on the PGA Tour, which you do now have on the Ladies European Tour, by the way.
Yeah. What this new position that the PGA Tour is hiring for? I think it's CEO, right? Is that person gonna, how is that dynamic going to be with Monahan? And do you have any updates on that search?
Yeah, we've reported the last few weeks there are 4 finalists, and it's a pretty interesting group of finalists. You've got David Abeleys, who's the CEO of TaylorMade, so you've got a kind of dyed-in-the-wool golf guy, right? You've got Jared Smith, who's a guy who used to run Ticketmaster. He's been running a mountain resort company for the last few years. So you've got a guy who's in the ticketing and entertainment industry, right? The third guy is Steve Phelps, who's run NASCAR very successfully for the last number of years, been at NASCAR for a long time and has done a great job, just signed really big new media deals. in NASCAR. And then the fourth, and maybe my one to watch, is Brian Rolapp, who's essentially one of Roger Goodell's top lieutenants at the NFL, running their media business. And so you've got kind of four very different candidates there.
These guys, but if they hire any of those people, they're going to want to come in and run the show, right? It's got to be a handoff. There's no way they're going to leave being number two at the NFL to be number two at the tour.
You're spot on, Dan. I don't think Steve Phelps leaves NASCAR, which outrates the PGA Tour every week on TV, or most weeks at least, and is going to go run the PGA Tour to work alongside Jay Monahan. I don't really know I don't know how that dynamic plays out. We've reported that Jay's contract is up at the end of next year, of 26. So who knows where he kind of goes beyond that. But yeah, I certainly don't think that Steve Phelps or Brian, like you said, Brian Rolapp's not going to leave the NFL as the number two to come run the PGA Tour and work under Jay Monahan. So still kind of to be determined how that dynamic plays out. But I certainly don't think that Jay Monahan's going to be the boss of the new CEO, because what organization has a CEO and a commissioner, right? Not many.
Yeah, it seems a bit redundant. That's awesome. That was great, Josh. I could pick your brain for a lot longer than this, and I probably will at the next media center I see you. We'll do this again. I like it.
Love it, man.
We're calling this JC's Business Hour. So thank you so much, Josh.
I love
we appreciate
it. I love it. Carpenter's Corner or something like that.
Carpenter's Corner. We'll take that.